we're going to take a few minutes for discussion because I want to open this up a little bit, and we can take it a little bit off of our next workshop. But first of all, I want to thank the chairman for that, and I just, you know, would start by saying that just to sum up, that the chairman is saying that African internationalism, the theory of the chairman and of the African People's Socialist Party, challenges the concept of individual European nations, first of all, and that you're saying that all European nations are one nation, Uhuru, Dan, and others, Uhuru, that the European group is one nation, and it is a bourgeois nation, and it is a nation that has its identity and its material reality at the expense of Africa and African people, and therefore Africa and African people are denied a nation inside, of course, the U.S. or Brazil or Jamaica or any place else, and in Africa, because in Africa, Africans do not control Africa, and it's controlled through neo-colonialism and other kinds of things. So Africans are the objects of history. And that you are saying that the white nation is a bourgeois nation. And it's a bourgeois nation that all strata of white people have participated and united with and enjoyed the loot of the extraction of the wealth from Africans. You look like did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, that it's not a bourgeois nation because all whites have enjoyed or participated in it. It's because of the identity that is imposed on everybody in that relationship, and that is it's a welcome identity. It's a hard palpitating kind of identity that, you know, when you hear the Star Spangled Banner under certain circumstances, and that makes somebody come from, what is this poor place where all the white people are located in this country that people talk about? Appalachian. That makes, you know, like some you know, Joe from the Appalachians willing to throw on a uniform and go to murder somebody in some other part of the world who's never done anything to them. It is, you know, so it's a part of this group. The only thing I'm trying to say is that it's not necessary for somebody to even feel a sense of appreciation or something like that. It's what you get sort of born into it, and most people accept and adopt this identity. I've done poorly in responding to what you were saying, but I think that it's right. That white people as a whole embrace the unity with our own ruling class in order to participate in the loot and everything that gives you at the expense of African people. And you say that, a couple of questions that I have is, first of all, you say that Mao said that all national liberation struggles are struggles for internationalism. Would you? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. No,
that was wrong.
Struggles for internationalism, but wars of national liberation, I think he characterizes as practical struggles of internationalism or something to that effect. Not struggles for internationalism, but it is internationalism in practice. That wars of national liberation are indeed internationalism in practice, something to that effect. That's a paraphrase.
And would you say that that is true today if, say, that war of national liberation took a consciousness of Islamic, or would you say, you know, or...
It's internationalism regardless of what its consciousness is, because you can't judge a movement by its own consciousness, can you? You make a mistake if you judge a movement by its own consciousness. That's why people believe that America is the home of the brave and the land of the free, or some other nonsense like that, because that's how it's conscious of itself. That's what we're talking about now. When we're talking this question of nation, we're challenging the consciousness of those who define the whiteness and the white nation, you know, in a certain way. We don't judge that. We don't judge this on the consciousness of those people. So you can't judge the movement by its own consciousness. But the struggles, that's why a lot of people don't understand. That's why we can say we unite with the struggles of the Iranian people, of the Iraqi people, even though those struggles do not represent themselves in the world as struggles for socialism or workers' power, etc., ultimately that is that we support if the workers' movement with Iran, inside Iran, etc., occurs, right on for that. But it is an attack on the imperialism, and therefore it is something that is consistent with the historical trajectory of all the peoples to end, like domination by imperialism. Yeah.
Uhuru, I really appreciate this discussion because I feel like this is so critical because it's a huge question that comes up all the time. The question of, why black power? Why, this is for black people, or, so I just
and
want
they never, if they'd only said that some years ago, why black slavery? Why black colonialism? Why not slavery for everybody? Yeah.
So, just to get clear on like the state and the nation, so you've said that the state in Africa was not developed at the time of European invasion because there were no class contradictions of that level that would require the existence of a state. And that's evidence of like the egalitarian and positive character of African society. Then you're saying that European invasion, also that the European invasion and colonization of Africa interfered with a process of African consolidation of the African nation, and then that the consolidation of the African nation today is a critical necessity in the victorious struggle against imperialism and capitalism. You were just now saying about how the ASI makes it possible to win socialism in many countries at about the same time, and also, we've talked about how Africa is the pedestal, and so therefore those victories for socialism is particularly critical in anti-imperialist struggle. So I guess, so the thing I just want to be clear about, you're not saying that, so when we say a world without borders, like in a post-imperialist free world, without state borders or national oppression, are you saying there is a value to national identity, or in terms of like security and protection and connection to history and legacy, and it can be a positive national identity? It's just in the current period and past 1,000 years or whatever that the European national identity is wedded with capitalism. So when we say a world without borders, you're talking about state borders and oppressive borders, not necessarily the liquidation of any form of national identity.
Okay, good. First of all, it's not absolutely accurate to say there were no states in Africa, but what is more appropriate, I think, that states as we have come to understand them in terms of what has transpired essentially in Europe. And that has a lot to do with the question of private property. And most of the, from my own, I'm not a historian, by the way, but most of what I've been able to see is that Europe was one of the places that defined the state based on territory, like territorial and with absolute borders and that kind of thing. And land ownership was, as Jaffe's quote, makes clear that was one of the distinguishing things about Europe, that, the ownership, private property, land, private property. But when we talk about the post-imperialist world and the nation without borders, what I'm saying is that it is the struggles for national liberation that also results in the disintegration of the bourgeois nation and nation state that also makes nations themselves unnecessary. The concept of nations, we live in a world, the whole concept of separate and distinct people, the reason that is of some significance today is because of the terrible exploitation that is experienced of nations by nations, or that is the profound contradiction. But I mentioned, I think yesterday, this whole concept, for example, of a trade deficit between, what in the hell is how does that happen? It happens because some assumption of competition between so-called different countries and nations, etc. When if you're talking about a world economy, if you're talking about a single economy connected together where the workers and people who produce value are the ones who own and control the value, then the concept of a deficit, how do you have a deficit against yourself? The reason, you couldn't have a deficit against yourself, for the world we're talking about is literally a world without border. And the assumption that it is unnatural, the kinds of relationships that have been imposed on us by, which are relations of exploitation. Yeah. Is that helpful at all? Okay. I was hoping that this discussion we went into would really try to make the point that you have the rise of the bourgeois nation. The European nation emerged as a bourgeois nation. That's something I never see the Marxists or anybody talk about. It didn't just, it came into existence as a bourgeois nation of colonialism and capitalism itself. You have the rise of the bourgeois nation. That's even when the Marxists would argue with us about, that we couldn't be a nation because all the nations were consolidated with the advent of capitalism. That's what they would argue. That was when all the nations in the world were consolidated. In other words, that's when white people emerged, as this entity, but even after that, the struggle around nations and the so-called national question was one that perplexed, like much of Europe and resulted in all kinds of wars and, etc. But the whole process, I think it's really important to recognize, and I'm not just saying this is not a polemic. You can just go and look at when and how nations came into existence and see there's a direct consequence of the capitalist, like emergence of colonialism, etc. You have the rise of what people refer to as all the so-called nations today. So the point is that it was born as a bourgeois nation. Even if you want to take them separately, like France and what have you, it was born as a bourgeois nation. And it was no such thing as the workers. The workers, became conscious of themselves through the articulations of the bourgeoisie of the ruling class. And they became conscious of themselves, as belonging to the nation group and off of colonialism and capitalism. So it was a bourgeois nation that we are talking about. Now, the struggles, the genuine struggles of oppressed peoples around the world, some of them are trying to join imperialism. That's what's happening with China now, Brazil now, South Africa now. They're trying to join with it, but the struggles ultimately that's led by the working classes of these countries who have no stakes in exploitation, no stakes, like in oppression, and really in the final analysis, whether they're conscious of it or not, no stake in these borders. Because before Europe got there, there were no borders in Africa. There were no borders in the Americas. These are borders that were created once they got here. And that was true of much of the world where Europe has gone to. So it's not like it's a weird idea that we are talking about, So yeah, we're talking about a world without borders that can, because the workers of the world, finally, Marx, workers of the world, you unite, you only have your chains. What are you talking about? We were the ones who were chained. It was those of us who were chained who made the workers of the world possible. But finally, we began to talk about the workers of the world. And workers of the world, have to lead these struggles for national liberation